Some religions like to divide the world into dark and light, unknowable, that which is hidden and that which is comprehensible, the surface and the depths. Sometimes, pursuing the less traveled roads in our virtual world of the internet, you feel haunted by shadows. Be them small Discord servers dedicated to summoning imaginary friends into the realm of everyday life, be them those corners of YouTube where the light of the holy algorithm shines a little less brightly. Everything is connected to each other, sometimes by a piece of rebar, sometimes by a piece of piano wire, sometimes by the galvanized bond of the cult classic and its tightly knit community, sometimes the rusted coils of those videos that have found no audience loyal or disloyal. Sometimes when traveling these almost eldritch depths, you might stumble into something truly original, something yet uncontaminated by clicks per view and views per impression. Introducing to you Jishu Sekaku Anime Datipe no Daiboken Kohen 1982 Independent Animation The Dirty Pair's Great Adventure 1982. As the title might suggest, this is a piece of independent animation produced in 1982. The video was published 9 years ago in 2016. It is about 17 minutes long and has amassed around 33,000 views. Not the most underground video in this platform, but it doesn't come even close to what the big players of YouTube are able to get video after only a couple of days of the video being published, or even less. Still, an average of around 10.3 views a day is nothing to scoff at. A quick reading of the description yields some data. That this video is being uploaded to YouTube by someone who worked on it around 44 years ago, 35 by the time of the upload. And that this is the third part of a three-part effort that took 3 years of work, from 1980 to 1982. It was made by a manga culture study group of a Japanese civil engineering university. These university clubs are a kind of continuation of those high school clubs you often hear about in anime. They are a great topic of discussion in Otaku no Video, and the activities of the club range from simply consuming and discussing otaku media, from doing full-blown productions of things like manga, light novels, anime, cosplay, just to name a few. The video's publisher only joined the club from the second part onwards, or at least only worked on this production from the second part onwards. What remains of the description is a sort of historical retelling of how the anime was produced, the circumstances around the production, and about some of the people that participated on the production, and our uploader's personal role in making the anime. I'll reference this as I need to. For now, I'll just highlight the following comments he makes as the conclusion of the video description. This might be a cell animation created 35 years ago on 8mm film, but I still look back to those days in which I, with crude technique, worked on it recklessly. And with this same reckless spirit, I would like to present it to you today. Director of the third part, Kawano. So, the more practical details. What the hell is the Dirty Pair's Great Adventure? Well, it's not an original universe created by Studio Mongmong. Rather, this anime is a derivative work from a Japanese science fiction novel published in SF Magazine in May 1980, aptly called Datipe no Daiboken, The Dirty Pair's Great Adventure. SF Magazine, which, according to Wikipedia, was Japan's first successful commercial science fiction magazine. The Dirty Pair series spans a continuous run from 1980 all the way to 2007, with an isolated release in 2016. Dirty Pair would get an official award-winning adaptation by Nippon Sunrise of Gundam fame in 1985. Nippon Sunrise was a studio known at the time, and for some time after that time, for an animation style called the Sunrise Smooth, so called for being well, smooth. And yeah, the emotion in Sunrise's Dirty Pair and associated OVAs and movies is buttery, nice, fun, fluid, flowy, and many other flowery adjectives. With great action scenes and general joint articulation of the characters, and the motions of the mechanical elements and special effects demonstrate great technical brilliance that places many now contemporary anime with much greater budget to shame. And the script writing, acting, set piecing and directing are not that bad either. It's a very enjoyable anime, even if it is not technically the most groundbreaking or avant-garde one. And it does have certain moments of even narrative genius in some of its episodes and some of its scenes. But this video is not about Sunrise's officially sanctioned adaptation of the Dirty Pair, even though itself is, right now in the West and maybe even in Japan, a more ignored work, because probably of its age. But that aside, I'll use this Sunrise's adaptation of Dirty Pair as a point of comparison sometimes. We are here to talk about the amateurish, unpolished, unsmooth, awkward work of a few dozen civil engineering university students. So allow me, before we get into the depths of this work, allow me to explain to you the basic premise of Dirty Pair using this Dirty Pair. You've got Kei and Yuri. One has black hair, the other red. They are inserted into the Girls with Guns tradition, working as operatives for the 3WA, an intergalactical private association of terrible consultants, special non-governmental agents that solve troubles. True to their Girls with Guns origins, both of them can be squarely classified in the more active and energetic variety of anime girl than the more innocent princessy type. Yuri is more girly, Kei is more tomboyish. Together they are equally flirtatious. They call themselves the Lovely Angels, but are named by others as the Dirty Pair, because wherever they go, problems follow. Sometimes the destruction of entire cities, sometimes the explosive decompression of unevacuated space stations, sometimes the collapse of an entire planet's ecosystem. You get the deal. Not that this really matters, since there is only so much that a short 17-minute film can show us. And as we'll see, this film is not the most character-defining characterization of either Yuri or Kei. And if you're not acquainted with them before watching this animation, you'd not become acquainted by means of watching it. But this tends to be the standard for most derivative works. Let's get the obvious out of the way. For the large majority of people, this is not the most entertaining of watches. And even in analysis, listen, there's no way I can spin this into some sort of true crime documentary. Those popular ones that go around on YouTube. It's a niche thing for niche people. Maybe now in 2025 it can reach a wider audience with the internet than it could with a small release at a university cultural festival in the 80s Japan, but it remains a small niche nonetheless. We can have all sort of discussions about if this state of things is positive for society in general or not, but it's a waste of time, because the discussion in itself is a waste of time. We cannot change the world by simply discussing it. Most anime culture content that goes around here on YouTube are not even the small authentic analysis done by people giving their genuine thoughts about works they are passionate about and want to understand better and have a discussion with like-minded people. What the sort of content that goes around and that people like to watch is at best pandering idle talk, in the middling point simply jokey newscasting, and at worst just pure advertising. Sorry, I got off topic, but I guess it is still related with this anime and our analysis of it. It's about a niche otaku experience, maybe the niche otaku experience. Maybe the distinguishing line that sets apart hobby from simple fandom. An anime that is firmly planted in an era that was the genesis of the otaku as we understand him today. And even today, how many still do their fan works and doujinshi with varying levels of success? What happened in the 80s was simply the creation of the distinction between enthusiast and casual consumer. Today it simply appears that such a distinction has, in public consciousness, been erased or softened, or maybe these sort of enthusiast works are just back in the shadows after a short period of heightened exposure. Here are some superficial observations. The animation style is incredibly limited, as expected of an amateur cell animation, and compared to 2020's anime, there's a great focus on mechanism, as you would expect from something from the early 80s. In fact, an interesting phenomenon can be observed here. The general style and presentation of the animation is not insignificantly lag behind compared to what was airing mainstream-wise in 1982. Case in point, Urusei Yatsura.
ラム、これはリボンといって地球の女のアクセサリーなんだよ。いっぺんつけてみんか。
リボンなんてダサくないか？今時リボンなんてさ。
さラム。
With its 1981 TV episodes, while still not as firmly planted in what we now consider the 80s style from later episodes of the same series, still stands firmly away from the style of the Cutie Honeys and Space Battleship Yamatos of the 70s. But the general style and presentation chosen for this fan animation approximates much more closely the already established styles, rather than attempting to set any new ones or copy the more recent ones. But also of note is a greater importance placed on moification than what is noticeable on 70s anime, which tends to have a style of female character that, while sometimes quite varied, focus on more classical presentations of femininity than the moe interpretation of the female character that we now recognize as the anime girl. In fact, many works of the early 80s, including Macross, still show a level of moification that is smaller, less significant than this fan animation. Looking, for example, at the Nippon Sunrise adaptation, we see a Yuri and a Kei that are more actiony and sexy intermixed with kawaii, rather than this almost wholly kawaii-fied rendering of the characters. Another thing to notice is the sound design, which is also awfully outdated. With sort of orchestrally space opera type of sound, rather than a more J-poppy or synthy kind of sound characteristic of the 80s. In fact, works that almost directly pastiche certain elements of Space Battleship Yamato, like Gainax's Topo Nerae, still use a more synth-based soundtrack. As we, or at least I, don't have access to the two previous parts of this anime, if even they are around anymore, it is difficult to analyze the narrative only having access to what is the last part of a three-part series. However, allow me to provide an analysis nonetheless. I'll also talk a bit about the animation sequences themselves, as they are kind of important in an animation. And I do mean analysis. I don't want to merely retell the story and the happenings of the anime. You can and you should watch the anime yourself. I cannot enjoy it for you. Well, sorry. Please excuse my sidetracking, but if I had a penny for every time a video essay is just a glorified story summary with some reaction to put in, well, anyway. The story begins with a nice parallel sequence shared by the bad guys and the protagonists. We can understand here that there's a genuine attempt at storytelling, or at least to imitate what real storytelling would be like. While this sequence is by itself not very interesting, nor in presentation or in content, it does show a striving for a cinematic presentation that sets this fan animation apart from the more utilitarian kitsch nature for whatever passes for animation in the year of our Lord 2025. In fact, this sort of style is unusual in the doujinshi animations of the 80s that survived until today, that were made as introductions to conventions, and as such less focused on narrative set pieces and more on action set pieces and sequences of animation that place the focus on the animation. Although there are exceptions to this rule. It tracks with the fact that these sort of intro animations like Daikon and Urakon were made by people expressing their animation virtuosity, while the Dirty Pair fan animation was made by people that, while lacking in technical skill, attempted to make an authentic work within the bounds of their material possibilities as civil engineering students. In a sense, this, while comparatively unimpressive, shows itself more realized in something like Urakon 3, but still inferior to the subterranean narrative of wonder found in Daikon 3, which just comes to show the talent that existed in its creation. Hopefully the comparisons I've just made have been able to contextualize the narrative and the anime inside this historical context, at least a little bit. The action follows in typical space fantasy fanfare with long-winded shots of spaceships and orchestral music that you wouldn't be surprised to see in Space Battleship Yamato. This relates to the detail that the original poster adds to the description of the video, talking about how they first created a maquette of the pair's spaceship in order to animate it. Yet another sort of compensatory measure employed to assuage their lack of technical skill, like later on in the bar scene, where there's a whole section that is clearly rotoscoped. And yes, even in rotoscoping, there is skill involved, even if it is a measure that reduces skill gaps and allows to do more with less. An obvious example of rotoscope professional anime is Flowers of Evil, and you can tell the moment flows much more naturally in there than what occurs here. Well, at least the rotoscoped, maybe ship sequences are pretty cool. These sequences could also just be very closely based on the movement of the real maquette rather than completely traced over. The space backgrounds and the mechanical movements are the best part of this anime, animation-wise. The poster mentions in the description that one of his kohai involved in the creation of this work went on to work professionally in anime, as a director none less. We of course cannot believe this 100% naively, but as the wise men say, big if true. There is some stumbling in the building up to certain story beats, probably due to a combination of a lack of budget and lack of skill, but they manage to develop a relatively satisfying, relatively thematically sound science fiction station sequence. But seriously, the character design and general animation of the main villain is just... his visage is almost uncanny. In fact, it is remarkable how unremarkable this whole sequence is. They, in my view, did a really good job here, limitations aside. I like their focus on the main characters and their reactions, though sometimes the angles are either rendered uncanny or are just way too flat and two-dimensional, though it certainly has love for the dirty pair in it. Just look at that air animation. The interspection of interior scenes with space battle scenes also works well. We work ourselves into an action sequence, and of course it is complete crap compared with the Sunshine battle sequences. The animations are mistimed. Sometimes they used either way too many in-betweens or not enough, and the motions are not well represented, or at least not well communicated, and the distortion of the perspective is not well controlled enough. Either way, a rather standard action sequence. That, as with everything in this anime, is really well done taking into account the circumstances of its production. Something worth praising is how they are able to, even if just a little bit, show the personalities of the characters through the fight choreography and general character expression. Kei and Yuri, although not rendered in the most capable way, are not reduced to a nothing burger interchangeable slop with no personality disorder. Yes, I'm looking at you, fan animations, fan drawings, and fan fictions all around the internet. And I'm looking at you, modern anime characters, and also interesting design by committee ensemble of nothing burgers, and also interesting inflatable rubber internet avatars. Please excuse me. The sequence that follows is the most interesting, praiseworthy, and artistic sequence in this whole 15-minute anime. The bar scene. After a successful mission that ends in massive collateral damage, as per usual in the Dirty Pair style, we hard cut into a dimly lit bar scene. The camera angles are mostly close and claustrophobic, and the cinematic language successfully communicates a general atmosphere of depression and rundownness. It is a strangely down-to-earth moment, with the pair presumably reflecting, or at least maladapting, to their constant string of failures. This level of emotional intimacy once again contrasts with a more upbeat Sunrise anime that never has the angels actively doubting themselves, which once again just connects to the proto-moe which I observe in this work. The anime girl, in this way, is made emotionally available to the viewer, allowing him or her to attain the anime girl in a more first-person experience, a perspective wholly different from that which other mediums reserve to their characters. Connecting back to the Flowers of Evil anime, the director justified his rotoscoped anime adaptation by saying that if the adaptation had been live action, that the viewers wouldn't be able to see the characters for themselves, but only the actors. It is very interesting to me to see that this animation saw fit to express Kei and Yuri in this manner. Also, they gave Kei glasses, which is super moe and kawaii. And oh look, they do that double perspective thing again, that sort of parallel storytelling. And this time in a somewhat more esoteric way, relating the guard that harasses Yuri with the villain in a cell, and then just cuts to credits. A weird way to conclude things, but I'm not complaining. It was certainly an interesting sequence overall, and it shows an attempt to do something new and personal rather than, simply, copying the same tropes again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and reducing the entirety of everything to simple repetition, copy-paste of tropes. Sorry, excuse me. This was the bar scene, very short, but to me, very marking. Now, it's time for the conclusion. I'd first like to thank you for watching a niche video on a niche topic made by a niche person. I think that enthusiast culture and its productions are a very interesting thing, and it saddens me to see that it is very difficult to get any sort of alternative culture off the ground even in the best of days. We are way, way past the illustrious Gainax generation with the great dreams of anime that does more than entertain. And it is sad to see that not only did the initial philosophical assumptions that they held close to heart were even at the time somewhat misguided and myopic, but that they failed in such an explicit way at their nobler goals. It saddens me. It saddens me that the world is more and more geared towards an even greater hostility towards niche creative productions. An hostility even greater than the already great hostility of times past. With more and more things floating around on the internet, and with these things managed by algorithms that control viewer retention over any actual revolutionary intent, well, you know what, I'll just shut up. I don't want to waste your time with this stupid rant, and I'll just be repeating myself on this topic once again. Just, thank you, whoever you are.